What is going on, everybody, and welcome into a Tuesday, April 12th recording of the Unreasonable Odds podcast presented by DraftKings. We've been off for a little bit since March Madness. Steve Buchanan had our MLB preview with Robert Flores of MLB Network, but the NBA playoffs start on the night of this recording. If you count the play-in round, the real thing gets underway on Saturday afternoon, April 16th for the first round. So to preview the whole shebang, play-in tournament, the postseason, futures, wherever we want to go, bringing in James Alberino of Spread Investor, friend of the podcast. You probably follow him on Twitter at Spread Investor. James, how we doing, man?
I'm good, man. This is a fun week with the play-ins, and you got a bunch of games starting on Saturday and Sunday. So as always, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. And I like the play-in, actually, these last couple of years. It kind of adds a little bit more fun to the mix. Is it traditional? No, if you're a 7 or 8 seed and don't get in, that sucks for you. But it kind of reminds me of like the first 4 games of the NCAA tournament to get a little bit of action beforehand, and let some of these lower seeded teams battle it out. So, overall, regular season wise, it's kind of a completely different game, I would say, for sports bettors, for NBA bettors. I was very happy with my regular season, but a lot of those plays that I put out, if you're somebody that follows me, it's player props on injury news, it's first quarter, first half trends. And those things are just so much load management. These things are just tough to carry into the postseason. You got to look at the board completely differently. Before we start on these playing games, any thoughts from you, James, just on like things you did in the regular season that you liked that you think you can carry into the postseason, or things that you just want to wipe clean and say, I won a couple of bets on this in the regular season, I can't do it anymore in the postseason?
Well, I think you're right in the sense that if you're very analytical with your approach in the regular season, it's very different going to the playoffs because coaches are then putting in a lot more detailed game plans, specifically on the defensive side with the opponent they're playing. It's a different scouting report, different time in the year. Teams are going to be playing certain starters more minutes. They're at least willing to in the playoffs, and more or less do or die situations sometimes. And you have to look at more of the predictive game flow based off of a little bit more script in the playoffs. So I agree with you there completely. In terms of me personally, I bet a lot based off of matchups and situations. So even though it's not the same for me regular season to the playoffs, and I love regular season handicapping because you have such a big sample to choose from. And the NBA, everyone talks about load management. It's because they play so many games and so many games consecutively in a short span. Yeah. So from a betting perspective, that's less time for the bookmakers to focus on those games. And you as the bettor do have an advantage, especially during NFL season. So I would just say from a mentality standpoint, the playoffs are a little bit harder, but in the first round and the early parts of the second round, there is a lot of opportunity because there's still a lot of overwhelming amount of games for the books at points, and the narratives aren't exactly accurate at this time of the year right before the playoffs start.
Yep. And I played a lot of volume during the regular season, and, we'll have some volume in the play-in in the first round. But as things go on, I've learned from the last couple of postseasons not to give back too much from a great regular season, and to, something that I know you're on board with, pick your spots and, save your units, play the spots that you're confident in bigger, and go that route. So I say goodbye to some of my favorite bets. Like, we cashed the last 7 first quarter team totals against the Pacers, cashed the last 7 in a row to end the season. Things like that I'm talking about that are then going to disappear. And we got to actually handicap games now. So let's start doing that.
Well,
Tuesday. Go ahead.
For you to admit that and to know that about yourself from a capping standpoint is a really, tip of the cap, because it really is playing to your strength. There's no rule that says you have to play the same amount of volume, same amount of risk every
Right.
single month. If you're very good and you know that about yourself in the regular season and not as much, it's not to say you're not going to make money in the playoffs. You could still have a very good playoffs.
Well,
But,
I want to have
but
a very good playoffs by having, a 3-1 week versus a whatever it might have been before, a 12-5 week.
and for the average person betting, to take from that is, if hey, these 4 or 5 months, that's my big window, then you risk more there, and then you go a little bit slower for the other 2 months.
And I say it because I've been there. And like you've seen me be there. Like we were talking a lot when the NBA came back in the bubble. And I struggled immediately. I picked up where I was and started playing it again, and things were different, and it didn't work right away. So I say that from, I've been putting out plays. I think this is 4 years on Twitter publicly. I say that because I've been there and played too much volume in the postseason. So let's tighten it up. Let's pick our spots. And like you said, great regular season, but let's have a great postseason, probably with less volume.
Yes, sir.
So, all right, if you're listening to this, we'll start with the Tuesday night games for you because you probably want to get there, and it's probably getting close to these tip-offs for you by the time this podcast is out and you're listening to it. So the early games, 7-8 in the East. I mean, you got the Cavs, who are a great story. They're so run down with injury now, going to Brooklyn. I mean, I'm not too high on Brooklyn overall. The price that they are to win the East and win the title still gives us value on other teams because they still have to be overvalued, in my opinion. They don't play any defense. And even getting Ben Simmons back, if that actually happens, I'll believe it when I see it. You can't expect them to go a year without playing basketball and come back and just make you a good defensive team. Seth Curry, ankle dinged up. He said, ideally he would like some time, but they don't have that time. So it's all going to come down to the heavy lifting of KD and Kyrie and stringing together stops. I don't have a ton of takes on this game. I would be shocked if the Nets don't win. I'm here in Boston and people want to call into the radio shows and ask, could the Nets punt this game to avoid the Celtics and get Miami? They don't have time to play with their food like that. Because they are just not good enough. So the way that the Cavs are going, great story. I don't think they can win this game. 9.5 on DK Sportsbook as we record. That's a lot of points. If you're a money line parlay person and you need to bring something down a little bit, like you got a minus 200, you want to bring it down to even money or something, your Nets money line is sitting there. But otherwise, like, I'm working on my NBA best bets article. It'll be out by the time you listen. Like, Nets first quarter team total is 30.5. They've scored 30 plus in 7 of 8 first quarters in a row. I think they should come out aggressive and score in this game. They've covered the first half in 4 in a row at home, including an 8-point halftime lead against Cleveland. I think the Nets on the first half, there's something to that. But I don't know if I can get around to laying the 9.5 here. Your thoughts on Nets Cavs, James?
I like the Cavs in this game at 9.5.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people will be hesitant to play them because this line got more expensive. There's a number of games that if you pick, especially games that are highlighted, that the public's going to be on a lot, both NBA and college, where you'll see the favorites do get more expensive as the day and as the week goes on, and that's not the right side. Just one example, because it's recently – I know it's college, but Gonzaga was laying 8.5. They opened versus Arkansas. Yep. They closed at minus 10.5, and Arkansas wins the game outright. So I think that's where you're going to trip people up. But in terms of this game, these two just played each other last week. And, yeah, the Nets pulled away, and they won 118-107. That was a game going into the fourth quarter, and the Cavs won 2 quarters in that game. Close rematch typically does favor team that just lost. They'll make more adjustments than the team that just won. And if you just look at both teams, look at the Nets down the stretch the last 3-4 weeks. They lost at home to the Hornets. They got blown out at home versus the Mavs. Okay, Mavs playing very well, but still blown out by 21. Like you said, Seth Curry, ankle injuries, playing through it. Patty Mills' splits since the All-Star break have been way down than they were prior to the All-Star break. And what a lot of people don't put stock into, and you're a hoops guy, so you understand this more, and a lot of people from Boston will understand this, because I think there are more basketball purists in Boston than in other parts of the country. fitting multiple guys into a rotation with 6 weeks left into the season is very, very difficult. And the Nets had to do that with Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and now that Dragic is back and he's playing tonight, as great of a player as Dragic is off the bench, really good veteran, it's very difficult then. If you look, Cam Thomas in certain games, who's a very good offensive player, the Nets haven't found him enough minutes because they're mixing guys in, and in a one-game
they're mixing guys in, and then they're getting hurt and coming out too, and then remixing them in. Like Dragic has been out, and now he's going to come back for a play.
It's very difficult for rhythm, and I think the Cavs injury situation is a little bit overblown because now they've had Mobley back for a couple of games. Last week when Mobley played versus the Nets, it was Mobley's first game back in over a week and a half. Mm-hmm. Now he's been in rhythm for a couple of games. This is a good roster, man. If you're the Cavs in that locker room, you got to be looking at this situation saying, okay, guys, we played pretty poor for our standards the last 4 or 5 weeks, but for 75% of this season, they were one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yep.
And their starting five, I would have loved for Jared Allen to be playing this. If Jared Allen played and this was 7.5, I would have put a significant amount of money on the Cavs. But because it's 9.5, even with just Evan Mobley, Lauri Markkanen's playing really well. He's averaging, I think, 21 or somewhere around 22 a game the last 4 games. Garland's going to have a big game. He can come close to what Kyrie puts out. And between LeVert, Markkanen, Mobley, no one's going to match KD. KD is going to go off. But between that and where the Cavs can have an advantage is on the bench with Kevin Love, Cedi Osman, Rondo, believe it or not, just because of his experience and this being a not a game 7. They haven't played each other 6 times prior. It's not the 2 best teams, but in one game playoff where you're going to throw the kitchen sink of a game plan, I think that there's obviously less pressure on the Cavs.
Right.
In the end, I think this is a tight game, and you got enough guys on the Cavs that can hang with the Nets roster that isn't as polished as you'd expect for the narrative.
So I have some Nets money line when it was more reasonably priced, under 400. We're talking like 375 range to round out some parlays. So I need the Nets to win this game. I'll probably run it back with some Cavs on the points because that is a large middle to say, hey, just keep this single digits. 2-part question for you before we move on. Or it's not even 2-part. It's just 2 separate questions. Number 1, what chance do you give Cleveland to actually win this game? And number 2, because the Cavs have the fallback of hosting a playoff game, a play-in game to get in, does it give you any concern playing the points and saying if it's close but not winnable late, that they kind of say, all right, we got to get ready for this next game and sit anybody?
I don't believe in that because the next game would be Friday. They have 2 days
rest.
Exactly.
A lot of rest.
It's not a cross-country trip. It's not like they're coming from Los Angeles. The Lakers didn't make the playoffs or the play-in, so they weren't.
Clippers did. We'll talk about them next.
We have enough time. we need some time for that. But the Cavs, I think, you're not going to try to fall back and say, let's just limp into this next game and settle for the 8 seed. This is a good basketball team, man. And
all right, so good basketball team. What chance do they have to win?
I would give them at least a 35% chance of winning this game.
Okay. So better. So are you going to play any? What is it? We got plus 350 on
yeah.
DK
Off the top of my head, I can't calculate what the probability odds are, and for what's the money line even? It's plus
350 on the Cavs.
Plus 350. Yeah, plus 350, which means the Nets are over minus 400, which is giving them over an 80% chance of winning. No, the odds definitely I don't know if the Cavs are going to win. I expect KD to close this game out. KD or Kyrie, I expect to just go off in the fourth quarter and pull away. But I think this will be a game and be competitive, late third, early fourth. And the Nets are going to have to go on a little bit of a run at the end as opposed to just being easy for them.
Yep. And I'm with you. You mentioned Garland. One of the things I wrote up, not sure if I'll bet it, but it's in my article for today. Garland over 25.5 points. It's a big number for a guy whose season average is 21 and change. But he did just have the 31 in Brooklyn. The Nets are dreadful defensively overall. They've gotten worse against point guards since Kyrie has gotten back. And Garland's got to be a scorer for them if they want to have a chance in this game. So just a spot to look at in the player prop market. The nightcap, 7-8 game out west, Clippers and Wolves. Clippers 3-point dogs, plus 130 on the money line, total 230.5. This is an interesting game because the Clippers, they add guys like Norm Powell and Robert Covington to fill those minutes with Kawhi and Paul George out. We'll see about Kawhi, but now Paul George is back and playing pretty well, and you get a ton of wing depth against this Minnesota team on top of what you already have. Towns has a pretty decent matchup in this one, but I think the Clippers have more advantages. And I think this is a huge game to win and get a young Memphis team that had a great season but hasn't proven anything yet versus lose. And I think the loser of this game is probably going to win that next game, given the competition, but have to go up against Phoenix, who is just a machine-like at this point. So your thoughts on Clippers Wolves playing for that 7 seed?
The Clippers are very dangerous. I've watched almost all of their games live, the full 48 since Paul George came back. They're playing extremely well, shooting the ball well, and you're exactly where my mindset is with this team getting better. Covington and Powell off the bench, not huge names, very, very good players for their role.
They're guys that, if you have one of those guys starting alongside Paul George, that's pretty good. And to have the depth of both of them is very good. No Luke Kennard, I will say. Luke Kennard ruled out for this game.
It's official? Okay, because I was monitoring that. I know the hamstring was an issue. I would have loved to see him play. I think that that impacts the bench's shooting a little bit, but they are deep where they have enough scorers. They've shot the ball so well since Paul George came back. Paul George didn't miss a beat. He's been hitting 3 to 5 3-pointers a game since he's come back. Zubac is playing well. Reggie Jackson, Terrence Mann. It's a very good defensive team. Covington and Powell just give you ball stoppers. They can guard the number 1 or the number 2 on the opposing team and limit them. And you get both of those guys can hit 3-pointers. It's a very, very good fit. I thought that how did they get both of those guys in that Bledsoe deal? I couldn't believe that, man. But
Portland wants to stink.
But that's made this team so much better. Hartenstein off the bench is very good for a big guy who's a no name in the NBA, so to speak. That being said, the Wolves are very good, and the Wolves have been very good at home down the stretch. My initial thought in this game was Clippers take them plus the points. And as yesterday went on, it felt like you're taking a multiple choice test and you filled in B, but you're like, wait, I think the answer's C, and you have to change it. I don't think I'm betting the Wolves, but I think they are the right side. If you look at what the Wolves have done in the last couple of weeks at home, they beat the Warriors. They beat the Grizzlies, who we both love, 119, 114. There was another really impressive win that they had at home. But they're really, really good offensively, and they could score 125 on almost anybody in the NBA. And I think the Clippers are a little bit better defensively and do have that edge. There's something about Minnesota at home. I think you're going to get a ridiculous game out of Patrick Beverley going against the Clippers. He's a menace defensively.
Right.
The Wolves are really, really big. They're bigger than the Clippers with guys like Naz Reid, Prince, and they have the 9-10 man rotation. They're going to bring about 4 guys into this game that could give the Clippers some trouble underneath. It's tough for me to take a side confidently, but the Wolves, when they've won this year, it's typically been by pretty good margins. So if you're gonna, I think the Wolves could cover this.
All right, we're differing on play-ins more than you thought we would, because I have
thought
some
you'd be on the
Clippers
Cavs with me. Honestly, that was the game that when I said to you before that I think we're going to be on the right side there. I thought you would like the Cavs. I figured you would be a
Well,
little.
I do. uh, if you said here's $100, you got to bet the spread on this game, I'm betting the Cavs plus 9.5.
Yeah.
I don't think Brooklyn loses it, which makes it harder to bet. But
Fair. You just have a lot of outs.
it's
One
it's
through
such
nine.
a large middle if you are in position to close things out with Nets money line and want to take the points.
Fair.
Yeah, but the spread, I can't lay 9.5 with the Nets. I think the Nets get off to a good start, but the Cavs are gritty enough and Brooklyn is sloppy enough, especially on defense, that it should be a close game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I have some Clippers plus 3.5 in that other game. You're right. The Wolves are a little scary. They did just lose a meaningful home game to the Wizards recently, so they can slip up. I just think the Clippers are a dangerous team, like you said, and I think that they want to prove that early. Not that Minnesota doesn't. I just think getting Memphis, and again, I don't want to talk down on Memphis, but when you compare them to the Suns, you want to get Memphis. I don't know. If we get
Here's going to be the key,
series,
man.
I'm interested in that.
Look, if you pick the Clippers and make arguments for them, everything that you say about them is factual. They're a good team. They're
right.
Well coached.
It sounds like you more so don't want to fade either team in that game.
I don't want to fade either team, and I honestly do think we're going to see a close game. I wouldn't be surprised if the final score is a Wolves win by 5. I think Anthony Edwards is one of the few guys that can give Paul George a little bit of a tough time, and you're going to see a lot of that matchup. The wing defenders, the length that the Wolves have to throw at PG is something that other teams that the Clippers have faced recently, like the Jazz, I think have holes defensively. I think the Wolves are going to give the Clippers a little bit different of a problem. One player prop I will say in this game is a good play. It's juiced. So let's see where it ends up for the day. Zubac over 7.5 rebounds. DK was minus 155 before we got on air, but he's had double-digit rebounds all 4 of the last 4 games, and they're not a big team. It's mostly him, Hartenstein, and Covington grabbing rebounds. So it's a great bet if you don't mind laying a little juice or get a better price.
I have a prop in this one that I kind of like too, and it is also a Clipper over 7.5 rebounds, but it is Paul George at plus 115 over 7.5 rebounds. This one hit a lot in the postseason last year. If you remember, this was a popular one that got there a lot. Tough to judge him recently. He's been back 5 games. He didn't get it the first 3. He did get it the last 2, playing just 28 and 34 minutes. Averaged 8.4 against the Wolves in 3 games this year. Timberwolves are a bottom 5 team, keeping shooting guards. Technically his position shooting guard. But we'll call him a bottom 5 team keeping wings off the glass this season. So I don't mind Zubac either, but I like Paul George maybe to grab some rebounds in this game. At least you're getting the price. You're getting plus money on it too.
He'll probably go over. Here's where in the beginning where you said the difference between regular season and playoff handicapping. I would only be a little bit concerned. And again, I don't think it's the wrong side, but I would be a little concerned because I think there's going to be more of a defensive game plan from Minnesota loading up on Paul George. My concern would be if the defense is so tight on him that is he in great position to even get maybe an offensive rebound? Is he going to be then more importantly, a little bit more worn down towards the fourth quarter where he might conserve some energy, say going for a rebound later in the game that might get him over and conserve his energy to get a big bucket late in the game.
These are the things you have to think about. It is a different game now. All right, Wednesday play-ins. Hornets 4.5-point dogs at the Hawks. Spurs 5-point dogs against the Pelicans. I don't have a ton of thoughts on these games. I don't like either of these 2 games too much. My gut call is if you said you got to bet both games, I would lay the 4.5 with Atlanta. I would take the 5 with San Antonio, but I don't know if I'll bet either game. Um, I don't. Atlanta laying the 4.5, maybe my favorite, but Charlotte's good enough to stay in that game. I really don't have many takes on these other two games.
I don't have a big bet on either side in both these games. My lean is with the Hornets, but I don't like going against the Hawks in Atlanta. They've been very good since the All-Star break, and they're very good in Atlanta to begin with. The Hawks have beaten Atlanta. The Hornets beat the Hawks once, I believe twice actually this season. Granted, one of the times was early in the season when Atlanta wasn't playing that well, so I don't think that game means a ton. But why I would lean with the Hornets is they've played really well the last 3 games. They had a little bit softer of a schedule. They had the Bulls mixed in with the Magic and Wizards, but sometimes those games when you're able to play a little bit weaker schedule after you struggled, but you do have the talent and you had a good season otherwise. Sometimes you get that rhythm. Sometimes just having that confidence and that rhythm back and seeing, even though it's against mediocre competition, just seeing the ball go through the hoop, you're going into this game with confidence at the least. And the Hornets have been better defensively the second half of the season. So I could see that being tight. Do I think that's a game that you bet and have comfortable margin? By no means, no. The Spurs and Pelicans game initially looked like the Spurs were the side. I would lean Pelicans, but I'm not laying the 5 with them. It would be Spurs or pass for me.
Yeah.
The Spurs were 27-44, and then the Lakers started losing a bunch of games, and the Spurs actually had a chance.
The Pelicans were buyers at the deadline. They had CJ McCollum, a huge ad, and the Spurs sell off Derek White. This is buyers hosting sellers here in a playoff.
That's what's the funny thing, man, is that the Spurs the last 3 games played not to win. Popovich
wanted they didn't even play Murray until the last game.
They sat their top 2-3 guys, and they wanted to see Josh Primo have more run. They wanted to see their young guys get run off the bench. So this is a weird game. And to me, I feel like the Pelicans were playing more playoff type games the last week and a half of the season than the Spurs were. And I would give them a little bit of an edge. And I feel like this might be – the tickets are all on the Spurs. I was shocked to see – and now it depends on which book and where you're looking, what source, but 84% of the tickets I saw this morning were on the Spurs, but less cash on the Spurs, significant less cash.
Yeah.
All that, I don't like going off of that as much as just a supplement to what I look at. You know how I feel on that. But
yep, and I'm with you on that. You can't – some people just bet based off splits. I can't do that.
If you're just betting a ton of volume, and if you talk about over 1,000 game sample size, you could profit off of that. But picking spots and betting a little bit more on certain games, I don't think that's a feasible approach. I would lean Pelicans actually.
It's a much bigger game for the Pelicans, who loaded up, and the Spurs, like you said, do they care? They're gonna try. They're here. But
it's just weird that they sat Murray the last 3 games, man.
I know
the fact that they weren't in the playoff picture and trying 3 weeks ago, then they get the 10 seed, and Popovich says, "All right, let's get the youth injection." If you're Popovich, think about it from this guy's standpoint. Guy's a legend. Guy's won multiple championships. They've had a great couple of drafts the last couple of years. You're not doing anything these playoffs. You actually low-key want to have a longer offseason and be done with this. You have no chance of beating the Suns. Less than 10% chance of beating the Suns. Why not get your offseason started? Why not get your young draft picks, why not you get them in a playoff atmosphere right now? That's, in my opinion, I think that's how Popovich is going to look at this game. Hey, we could make the playoffs as a 6th seed next year and have a chance of winning a playoff series. Why not play some of my guys a little bit less at the top of the order, top of the lineup, I should say, and give the younger guys some more runs? So that might be the storyline that no one's really talking about.
Yeah, it's a weird game. And the more the Spurs aren't, if they win this game in New Orleans, they're not going to beat the Minnesota LA loser. So I don't know. This game, it's making my head spin.
Let's put it this way. If this was -3, we would be saying, yeah, let's take the Pelicans. So the question really comes down to, is 2 points enough to balk at this and not play it? Or can the Pelicans, and let's look at their win margins lately, do they typically win games by more than 5?
Right. All right. Weird game. Nets Pelicans money line parlay -125 on DK Sportsbook. I'm not giving it out. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't even need your reaction if you don't want to react to it. Just throwing it out there.
I'm thinking of the plus money with the Cavs.
Right. I got to figure out what I'm doing with that, how much hedging I need to do in that game tonight, but that is not for this audience. All right. The real stuff, the real series and game ones that we have on the board. Let's start. We were texting about this one when Dallas was -3 in game 1 hosting Utah. Who knows what's going to happen with Luka Doncic, but the spread would indicate that he is not playing because it has moved 7.5 points to Dallas plus 4.5. If Doncic is ruled in for game 1, I'm going to get to this as quickly as possible and play Dallas at ridiculous value. I'm not huge on either of these two teams. Dallas has been playing much better down the stretch. Utah has had a lot of issues. Donovan Mitchell not happy with his team, seemingly. I'm not a big Jazz guy. I like the Mavericks a little bit better, but if Luka's not healthy, then I like nobody. I think you have more opinions on this game and series than I do. But my takeaway is just as soon as Luka Doncic is potentially ruled in, hitting Dallas in game 1 at the best number that I can get.
Well, this opened Dallas -3. It's Jazz +3, Jazz -3.5 now. So it swung 6.5 points.
DK has this at 4.5 as we're recording. Plus 155 money line on Dallas.
It's a 7.5 point swing on the Luka news. Yeah. Now, 20 minutes before we got on air, the medical update on Luka was that there was no grade given. What's happened and released in between now and then, I'm polite enough where I haven't checked my phone in the half hour we've been on air and talking to you, Julian.
I'm not polite. I checked
dinner in Boston.
I check my phone constantly during these podcasts, but we have nothing on Luka other than that last update that you gave.
Okay, well, the less significant takeaway is that if we do go to dinner, I won't have my phone and be that guy, but I won't judge you for doing so. I understand. What the takeaway from that medical update was that there was no grade 1 or 2 ankle sprain given. A calf strain given.
Yep.
Which means that there is a possibility it's less severe than believed to be. Luka and Jalen Brunson after the game also left clues that it might not be as severe as feared. But if you're the Mavs and you don't have to release this till Saturday, you're not going to give full details. Why would you? Force the Jazz to plan for both game plans. Now, in terms of the line and betting this, if you're betting just based off of news, you did a great job. You have CLV if you got the Jazz +3 and it moved and now 7.5. You have a great ticket. That being said, that doesn't mean it's a winning ticket. It means it's a very good bet. Doesn't mean it's a winning ticket because two things. How many times have we seen an injured star go down and a roster rises up, and also it's a challenge for the other team in terms of game plan, like we just said?
You know how many times I bet against the Sixers when Embiid's ruled out and get the number, and the Sixers win.
Game versus the Grizzlies. The game versus the Grizzlies in February. I know you bet that game.
Yep.
But with this too, 7, the line is pretty much at its peak. I don't know how much it might go to 5 if Luka's definitely ruled out. But
how much more is it going to move? It's almost. You rarely see a
player. You rarely see a player worth more than 7.5 points. So with that, you're getting a good number now on the Mavs at home. The Mavs are a very good defensive team. The Jazz have blown double-digit leads so many times this season in the second half. What I think the best way to play this game, truthfully, is to play it in game.
Yeah.
wait for the Jazz to get a lead potentially. I mean, they should at some point, and you get the Mavs at a better number. I think this can be close because Jalen Brunson will score a lot. Spencer Dinwiddie's been good for them. The Mavs have been better without Kristaps Porzingis. Spencer Dinwiddie's been playing well.
Yes.
Just the whole is better than the sum of their parts for this team. Well coached defensive team. The Jazz, there's been red flags with them all year. So just from a line standpoint, I kind of want to grab money, a little bit of Mavs plus 4.5, maybe 5. I think you can't definitively say this. I think we're going to see Luka play this game.
I do too.
If I had to say, is he going to play or not, I would lean towards playing.
Yep, I'm with you. And there was a game, I want to say it's earlier this season, and I can't figure out when it was, but there was a game that Luka hurt his ankle, and he was questionable. We didn't think he was going to play. It seemed like, or at least the line indicated he wouldn't, and he played very well, and the Mavericks won and covered. And I can't remember the game. Was it Knicks? There was a game this season that Doncic rolled his ankle pretty good previously and played through it. The
Knicks aren't exactly a good barometer to.
No, they're not. But that might not be the game because I can't remember it. So who knows?
Unless Julius Randle was sitting out of that game, there's really not a good reason to talk about it.
Any series play on this one? Because you can, if Luka plays game one, just like the game one line, the plus 145 or whatever it is on Dallas for the series is then going to move just like the game one's going to move.
I think the Raptors do win the series versus the 76ers.
Okay. Hold on. We'll get to series, but we'll get to that. Just any Utah Dallas series play, I guess.
Utah Dallas.
Yeah.
I wouldn't play the series.
Okay. That's all.
But I do think Mavs plus 150 or plus 140, they're around right now. It's a good number to grab because I don't know how much higher it'll get, especially with Luka if he's rolled in.
Right. Okay. I'm going to go with the games we have on the board now, and then we can quickly touch on the play-in ones. I know we're running a little long, so we'll run through rapid fire. Yep. Toronto, Philly. I know you have an opinion here. I share your opinion. Toronto plus 4.5 on DK Sportsbook game one, plus 160 money line. Totals 217. Series wise, we currently have Toronto plus 150. That one's come down a little bit on the series, and you can also bet series spreads on DK Sportsbook. Toronto, this one moved a lot. Toronto plus the game and a half is all the way up to minus 165 now, so that's a little juicy. Might as well just play them for the series. Tell me why you like the Raptors for the series, and do you like them in game one?
Very good defensive team, good rotation. I've given the Sixers problems all season. Sixers bench has flaws. Raptors bench is good. They have size. Sixers struggle to stop Siakam. And Thybulle's not going to play in Toronto, minimum 2 games.
Right.
I haven't put money on Raptors game one yet. I think it is the right side, a tight game. However, Sixers know they have to go and step on the gas for game one, because if they trail in this series and have to play 2 of the next 3 games without Thybulle, they're really, really facing an uphill battle down 1-0. So I'm probably going to play the Raptors game one with the mentality that if they don't cover, I'm coming right back and putting more money on them game 2. The Raptors should cover at least one of these 2 games in Philly. And in Toronto, same deal. They're going to be a really, really tough out for those 2 games. 2 good series ways to play this, because I don't necessarily love playing plus 150. Raptors in 6 is plus 500. Raptors in 7 is plus 600 on DK, I believe. Either way, they're both really, really good value. It's not going to be 4-1. The Sixers don't have that many problems. They would have to have a catastrophic collapse. They're good enough to go 6 games, but those are 2 really, really good tickets in my opinion.
Yep. Raptors 4-2 plus 500. Raptors 4-3 plus 600 on DK. So you got your money right there. If Toronto can get this one done, and it's hard to imagine they would do it in 4 or 5. So deeper series makes sense. By the way, producer Samir chiming in while you were talking. I believe it was Luka sprained ankle against Golden State in January, came back the next game, had a triple-double hosting the Bulls and won. I believe that was a game. At the time, the Bulls were playing much better, that I had the Bulls, and Luka got me. So he's played through pain. We'll put it that way.
Multiple times.
Yes. All right. The Saturday night game is the last one for Saturday we have on the board. Denver and Golden State. This series intrigues me a little bit. We haven't seen the Warriors at full strength or close to full strength in a while. They've had pieces just all over the place this year. Can they put it together? If there's a team that I think they can put it together against, Denver is the team that I've been looking to fade in the first round because they are all Jokic and nothing else. I've been watching them. I covered one of their games for NBA Bet Stream with Matt Moore and our own Shirag Hira. It was the Friday night Minnesota game that Minnesota went into Denver, huge game in the division and in the conference at the time, and Minnesota beat them pretty good. Jokic went bonkers, though. They're just all Jokic, and everybody else is kind of run down from this season for having to fill in for Jamal Murray, for Michael Porter Jr., and they don't have the pieces. So does Golden State have a great guy to cover Jokic? No, nobody does. He'll get his, but I just think everything else the Warriors have is too much. I haven't put anything on game one. I did take Golden State minus a game and a half in the series at even money. So Golden State to get this done without a game seven, essentially in 4, 5, or 6 games. I think the Warriors will advance even in their, what do we want to call it? Fragile state. I think they'll be able to turn it up. What say you on Denver Golden State?
I think the Warriors are the right side in game one, and I think they finish this in 6 games because as up and down as they were the last 2 months of the season, Klay Thompson the last week and a half is shooting the ball way better. He looks good. He looks really, really good. And this is the best he's shot since he's come back from the injury. And that was a big thing. You know, he hasn't played in almost 2 years. Comes back, you're fitting him in with a new rotation, a lot of new pieces in that rotation from 2 years ago. Game plan's got to be to limit guys like Aaron Gordon and Will Barton. Excuse me.
You're good. There comes the phone.
Probably, yeah, there you go. At dinner, I'll just turn it off. But I think that the Warriors, just think about it from the standpoint of this is going to be a really, really emotional game at Oracle. The first playoff game for Klay Thompson. The crowd is going to be nuts there. And even if Jokic just has a good game, I think the Warriors are – Jordan Poole's playing and shooting incredible. Draymond Green's had time to get back in rhythm. The Warriors are definitely starting to trend a lot more upwards than they were. And you're looking for another money line piece, this is the one.
Okay, there you go. So there's your money line piece for game one. I assume you like it it was 4.5. Do you like it at the 5?
I do. Yeah. I could see the Warriors winning this game by 3 possessions, about 7 to 9.
I'm really down on the Nuggets outside of Jokic. And I have my Jokic MVP ticket that is looking, better and better by the day. Like, love him, but just looking at the pieces around him, it's like the games, if Denver wins a game or 2 in this series, I'm leaning towards like 4-1 Warriors, honestly. But the game or 2 that they get in this series, it's going to take like the 40, 15, and 15 type of stuff from him in those games that they win.
I think you're right. And putting Looney and
Looney's great, and like Draymond is
even Kuminga. Just he doesn't have the height. There'll be a little difference, but if you get another physical body and just someone who could disrupt him while he's looking to make passes at the top of the key.
Jokic gets frustrated too. He can lose his cool.
And the Nuggets, when they play well, their ceiling's pretty high, but there's just not consistency from them. And the Warriors are starting to build better habits since Green's been back. Yeah, I'm with you. This is a Warrior series in play.
Yep. Okay, the Sunday game that we do have on the board so far, Bucks have grown to 10-point favorites over the struggling Bulls. I don't know anybody that likes the Bulls in the game. I don't know anybody that likes the Bulls in the series. When we were texting about setting this podcast up, I sent you a screenshot of Bucks minus 2.5 games at even money on DraftKings Sportsbook. So Bucks to win in 4 or 5. By the end of the day, that was at minus 195. That was a nice gift from from my colleagues. Hopefully some of you listeners got it because it was mispriced and it moved. What I have done, I got a little bit of that at minus 120, and then I was able to get some more down basically on just Bucks in 4 and Bucks in 5 in what averaged out to around a minus 165 line by playing the 2. So I have nothing on game 1. The money line's over 500. I can't imagine that you want to use that for anything, but that's what it is. The Bucks are going to win this in 4 or 5, and that's where I'm just leaving my money.
Well, yeah, but the price to take advantage of, unless it moves a lot more after this, but the Bucks 4-0 is plus 250 as of an hour ago.
Yep, it's still there.
One was about plus 180, plus 185. The Bulls aren't taking this to 6 unless 2 players on the Bucks get injured, and not just 2 players, 2 stars. It would mean the Bucks, in order for this series to probably go to 6, it would take Giannis, a combination of these 2, Giannis, Middleton, and probably 2 of the 3, Holiday, Middleton, and Giannis. 2 of those 3. If only one of those 3 gets hurt in this series, then they're winning this series in 5. The Bulls are banged up. The Bulls have no momentum. The Bulls have been getting blown out. Zach LaVine's not the same. If they're healthy, it's a completely different series and it goes 6. This is a mismatch. And I think the play in game 1 to look at is Bucks first half minus 5.5.
Yep.
Game 1's home teams usually, if they're elite, they start out, it's a ton of energy.
And the Bulls, by the way, a very slow starting team. They were a team to fade the last half of the season on the first quarter and first half spreads.
Yes. The only thing I don't love is that the Bucks are going to be coming into this game with 8 days rest because of the play-in tournament and a longer layoff between actual end of regular season and playoff start. So yep. I wouldn't bet it for a ton of money, but the Bucks are the type of team that even if it is tied at the end of the first quarter, they could go on such a run in the second quarter, and 5.5 for them in 24 minutes is not a lot.
And one of the interesting things about this series, with it being, local, is the no travel. Really, you just kind of you're taking a bus the whole series. That's why the Bucks wanted to lose that game on Sunday and drop down and get the Bulls and have this cushy period where they're not traveling outside of the bus rides for, over a couple weeks.
I know we've gone long on this podcast, but one quick note, and what's funny is if you're the Bucks, you can't blame them at all for punting on that game on Sunday. And people are going to say, oh, they're dodging the Nets. They don't care if they play the Nets. They beat the Nets last year. Okay, it was without Kyrie, but they just beat them last week. You would much rather, as a coach, know your opponent and be able to prepare for that opponent for 8 games, as opposed to waiting till the end of Friday night when the play-in tournament's done and saying, okay, on 30 hours of prep, now I have to go and scramble and play this team that has momentum and has not been resting for 9 days. So all that being said, what I think at the end of it, the Bucks are going to be more fueled by this because people say, oh, you're dodging the Nets, and the Bucks are going to want to come out and make people look a little silly.
I'm with you. All right. Just closing thoughts, I guess, because we've given a lot here. On any of the potential series, I honestly think so. I'm expecting the Nets to win the play-in game and get Boston. The way that futures are priced to come out of the Eastern Conference, it would indicate that the Celtics will be series underdogs against Brooklyn. I will take the Celtics there at any kind of plus money. Even without Rob Williams, they still do what they do. They still play defense, and Brooklyn does not. and Tatum's getting closer and closer. He's not Durant, but he's getting closer and closer to a Durant caliber player. So Celtics series line against the Nets is something I'm kind of looking forward to. And then whoever the Clippers get, maybe it has to be a series spread plus some games or something. Those are the two things I'm looking at, potential first rounds coming out of the play-ins. Anything sticking out to you?
If the Celtics, if and when they're plus money versus the Nets, I'm with you. I'm all over that. I'm putting a lot of money on that.
Yeah, that's probably a big one.
I'm putting a lot of money on game one, with the caveat being that they're going to have a little bit of a layoff. But the Celtics, I would love them in that series. Their bench, rotation, defense better than the Nets, and
I'm trying not to be a homer with that one.
I'm
a season ticket holder, so I like to run it by people. Grew up a fan, but I think that the way they're playing, that's a gift, that line, because Brooklyn's been overpriced all season.
Every playoffs, there's a narrative, and that narrative more times than not, historically, isn't accurate.
Right.
Not all the time, but more times than not, it's not accurate. Last year it was the Lakers. There's no way they're going to lose to the Suns. There's no way the Lakers and AD. Okay, they got nicked up, but they still lost in dominant fashion by the Suns. It's not the same narrative because the Nets are better than the Lakers were last year, but it's there's no way the Nets. You're expecting them to go to the finals or at least make the conference finals. I think that the Celtics would beat them in the series. Any other potential look-aheads? Man, if the Clippers play the Suns, Clippers are probably going to be getting over a touchdown on the road. Wow. They'll be getting 8.5, 9. And as much as I love the Suns, they'll probably be one game. It might be game one because of the layoff, but that would be great if you get the Clippers at +9 in game one. It's a good bet.
What would you think of a +2.5 series spread? Can they win 2 games?
I think they would win one and probably have 1 or 2 really close games that the Suns.
So better to go game by game and take points.
Yeah, because I wouldn't suggest taking too much money away from when they get a lot of points on the road to shift it to a series bet.
Yep.
They'll probably get one in LA as small dogs or close to pick them.
All right, last questions then, I guess. How does this shake out? Is there any series in particular that you're looking forward to, and who do you think goes to the finals? I don't see anybody beating Phoenix. I have some Phoenix. I have some Suns at not even a great price, like +150 to win the West, and I'll deal with it when I have to deal with it. But it just got to the point where it looked pretty clear that they're at least going to be in that conference final. And the East is good, man. The East is really good. We might get that Bucks Celtics second round series that the Bucks did give away home court advantage for. That's what they did do with that loss to get Chicago. I think that's going to be an interesting series. And I think, the Heat have a really nice path in that 1 seed, I guess. The East is going to be interesting. I have Celtics and Heat tickets in the East and a Phoenix ticket in the West.
I think those are the two. I think the Celtics, the Heat, both of the values completely shot on them the last 2 months.
Right.
The best ticket now where the current numbers stand is the Raptors. They're around +2,500 to win the East. We give them a better than 55% chance of beating the Sixers in this series. I think we're going to see the Heat and the Raptors in the second round, which would be incredible basketball. The narrative of Kyle Lowry going back to Toronto.
Yeah.
They just had a really, really good game with them last week. This would be a really competitive series. It would be really good from a betting standpoint to bet the dog on the road, no matter who's on the road in that series. And I think the Heat have moved on from their Jimmy Butler episode a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I think, Dwayne Wade also had a flare of tempers with Spoelstra, and they went on to win the chip that year.
Yep. So
it just means, a lot of people from the outside, when they see in sports emotions and tempers flare up and some teams it is a red flag. But when some teams are in first place and they do move on from it, you kind of then got to look at it in retrospect and say, all right, they're really trying. Like, these guys have when you're that competitive, it gets intense. You got a lot on the line. So I wouldn't jump to conclusions and think the Heat are in trouble. But why I think the Raptors are a good ticket is because if the Heat's problems do flare up over the next 2 weeks, the Raptors are in a good position to win that series then. And it would then be Raptors versus what I think will be the winner of the Bucks and Celtics, which, yes, the home court advantage in Game 7 potentially gives the Celtics an edge. Celtics would get Robert Williams back at the end of that.
Well, I mean, that's when you hedge it with,
because the series price would be +3 or +350, and that's the best tick. Even if they don't make it past the Sixers, I will still stand by me saying right now, the Raptors around +2,500 to win the East right now is currently the best ticket to win the East right now.
All right. Hot take. I like it. It's an interesting path.
That's +2,500. That's not that hot, man. If they're +1,000, that's a hot take.
All right. Well, let me look at
talking value
right now real quick. Let's see. Team futures. Toronto Raptors +3,000 Eastern Conference.
Come on, $100. If you can win $3,000 on that, even if you could get this to even the second round, you got to be happy with that, man.
Yeah. All right. Well, the Raptors seem to be the dog that we like in these series, but that is plenty of NBA talk for you guys. Plenty of NBA plays to pretty much get you from Tuesday through the weekend, and further if you're betting some of those series lines. Golden State, if you get anything down on Milwaukee. And sweat some of these series out. So that is the NBA playoff preview from Unreasonable Odds. We'll be back throughout the NBA playoffs and give you a little bit more. I'm Julian Edlow. You can follow me on Twitter at Julian Edlow. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Unreasonable Odd. Yes, we ran out of room for the S, but you'll still be able to find us. For our guest, James Alberino, find all his work at Spread Investor. Follow him on Twitter at Spread Investor. Always dialed in for basketball, always dialed in for NBA. And of course the NBA playoffs. Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely, man. This was fun, and have a good playoffs.
Yeah, you too. We will be in touch, and I'm sure on plenty of the same things. And let's keep it rolling. This is normally the point where I say we'll be back next week, but we're on kind of like a week to week decide if we need a podcast basis. But I would imagine that we will be back next week with some form, probably a combination with my co-host Steve Buchanan. Get some NBA and MLB together for you. That is a podcast. Good luck. Make some money on NBA, people.